All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Eric Hayden, warning coordination meteorologist with the Weather Service out of Morehead City. What you're looking at right now is the radar out of here in Morehead City. What you see is what you get for the rest of today. Breezy, especially along the coast, kind of a cool, damp feeling. We've got some light rain, not in association with Ian, just kind of a dreary day and breezy, especially along the coast. So no changes with that. That will continue for the rest of the day into tonight. Some changes with the track forecast slightly. The impacts on us really have not changed a lot, just some refinement and then some messaging challenges because it is a very complicated system. It's not just Ian that we're worried about in terms of issues across our area. So this is the latest track from the Hurricane Center with Ian, max winds 70 miles per hour. They do anticipate some slight strengthening here over the next 24 hours as it moves to the northeast. Expected landfall somewhere along the South Carolina coastline near Charleston up through Myrtle Beach. The red or pink shading, depending on your screen on this, show where we expect hurricane force winds. The yellow, strong tropical. So for our area, mostly this light blue, that is sustained winds, tropical storm force, which is above 39 miles per hour. For a lot of us, that will occur in gusts. The best chance for sustained tropical storm force winds will definitely be as you get closer to the Crystal Coast, especially the Outer Banks and any areas open to the water with a northeast to eventually southeast projection. So we still feel the strongest winds in our area will certainly be down by the coastline itself. One thing we do want to pay attention to, this track itself probably won't change a great deal, but if it shifts just a little bit farther to the east, we may start to see some stronger winds in our southwest counties. That would be like Onslow up through Duplin County. So kind of keep that in mind with any changes over the next 24 hours. But without a doubt, we think wind and surge and coastal issues are going to be our main issues, not wind. So we want to focus on that here through the next couple slides. This is a model depiction of what is expected over the next 24 hours. We like to show you this mainly for the evolution of how we think things are going to progress. Don't pay specific attention too much to the specific time, just generalities, because we think it does a really good capture of what we anticipate in our area over the next 24 hours. So again, a lot of times we don't like to show a model depiction, but we think this particular one is doing a really good job on what we can anticipate. So what you see is what you get for today. Dreary, periods of drizzle, light showers, breezy, especially along the coast. This is what it looks like later this evening. Again, some scattered showers. The center of Ian well to our south and west. But what we're going to be watching overnight tonight is these bands of heavier rain as they move toward the coastline. This is along a front that's actually going to lift northward as Ian lifts northward. So as we get after midnight, and especially toward early Friday morning, notice these darker reds and oranges off our coastline are starting to move toward us. Those will be the periods of heavy rain. So real light stuff through evening tonight, but the rain will really pick up tomorrow. We'll have periods of heavy rain. And the thing I want to point out, notice how the model is showing these individual pockets of heavier rain. Those are where we could see some isolated tornadoes. So anytime you have a landfalling tropical cyclone, you are at risk for tornadoes. And as we animate this through the day tomorrow, periods of heavy rain, that's been a really consistent forecast. But as these bands of rain rotate onshore, that's when we're concerned with the potential for tornadoes. So tomorrow, breezy day, yes. Biggest concern is heavy rain. Could see some isolated flash flooding. I'll show you our rainfall total here in a second. That hasn't changed a lot. We don't think it's going to be a widespread event. We're dry for a lot of us, and we do expect this to move through pretty quickly during the day. However, as those bands line up, if they train in any one individual area, that's where we'll have some flooding. And if you trace these, they go all the way far to the south. They have a tropical connection. So you'll notice today it's really dreary and chilly out. It's hard to imagine a tropical cyclone headed our way, but dew points are really going to increase tomorrow. It's going to feel more tropical, especially as we head throughout the day. That's when we're going to see periods of those heavy rain. But I really want to point your attention to some of these individual cells. Don't look at it and say it's going to happen here or there on the model depiction. What we're trying to convey is within those heavier bands of rain will be some gustier winds, but also that tornado threat. So please message to people to have multiple ways to get warnings. If they're home from school and work, it's just a little rain and wind and overall not a huge impact on our area, we still are concerned with the tornado threat as that system moves onshore. As we head toward tomorrow evening, the real heaviest of the rain actually lifts to our north. So by later tomorrow night, a lot of the rain is going to be out of here, and that's where things will diminish in terms of the flood threat and tornado threat. So for heavy rain, without a doubt, is tomorrow, and tornado threat definitely tomorrow into perhaps tomorrow evening. Want to talk about winds a little bit. Not a huge impact in our area for winds in terms of magnitude. The bigger impact is the duration. If you saw any of our briefings, it was long duration, long duration, long duration. That's what's causing some issues in terms of elevated water levels already, and that will continue as we head into the day tomorrow. So this is a model depiction later this evening. Again, some of these wind gusts 40 mile per hour, so tropical storm force wind gusts possible as early as this evening, especially on the Outer Banks and the Crystal Coast. Really a combination of high pressure to the north and Ian, which will be well to the south at this point. So a complicated weather scenario, but for the average person, it's going to be windy, especially along the coastline. As we head through the night, though, as Ian starts to lift toward the South Carolina coastline, this axis of heavy winds is going to shift toward the coast itself. So still the coastal areas stand the best chance for sustained winds of tropical storm force with gusts higher than that. Inland areas, probably mainly gusts for tropical storm force. Some of these greens and yellows indicate some gusts toward 40 miles per hour, and that will continue through the day tomorrow. One thing I want to back up, it's prevailing northeast wind, and that will have some surge and coastal impacts. I'll show that in a second. Northern Outer Banks, especially the Neuse River initially, and then as we shift around to the southeast during the day tomorrow, could have some issues, coastal Onslow, Bogue Inlet, those areas, as the winds shift into the southeast ahead of Ian as it tracks toward the South Carolina coastline. So we mentioned heavy rain. Our rainfall amounts have not changed too much. Let me bring that up for you here. So generally 3 to 6, 4 to 6 of rainfall. I know we've got a bullseye here, but that's just because we went into that 6-inch threshold. I don't think we'll see 8-inch amounts, but the bottom line on this is everybody is at risk for locally heavy rain tomorrow. It will probably set up in banded structure, so not everyone will see a widespread rain, but where these bands set up, 3, 4, 5 inches of rain is certainly possible. And where we have that, that's where we could have some isolated flash flooding during the day tomorrow. As you saw from that depiction, we really think the heavy rain threat will end pretty quickly tomorrow night, so that's certainly good news. We mentioned the wind speeds. Those have also not changed much. This is the latest map showing, especially in gusts inland, 30 to 40 miles per hour is pretty consistent. Where we think the sustained tropical storm force winds will be, and certainly gusts will be on the waterways and coastal areas. So certainly the Outer Banks gusting up to 50, sustained tropical storm force winds are expected, and then the Crystal Coast itself. For these inland areas, you'll have to watch Onslow, Lenoir, and Duplin County. If that trend continues eastward, some of these gusts, Kenansville, Kinston, down through North Topsail Beach, these could potentially be a little stronger if that track continues to shift to the east. But really the wind threat is piling up the water more than anything. For the most part, we can handle these winds. Could there be some scattered power outages? Sure, but our bigger concern is rain, potential for tornadoes, and then the coastal flooding and surge. So we've mentioned the rain, we mentioned the windfall. I want to focus on the surge. This was the best way I could depict it, so I'm going to kind of walk you through it because there's a lot of bright colors on here, and I don't want you to focus too much on the colors as much as I want you to focus on the areas that we're concerned. So I'll back this up. This is model guidance, but it's just going to do a good job for us showing our areas of concern as we head through the overnight into the day on Friday. So I paused it on purpose at 1 in the morning tonight. Persistent northeast wind. So with that, especially Outer Banks north of Hatteras Island, these areas with the persistent flow could see some coastal flooding. The lower part of the Pamlico Sound, so the southwest side, so places like Down East Carteret, up the Pamlico River itself, and especially up the Neuse. As we animate this into the day, late tonight and Friday, you'll start to notice that the Neuse River really starts to light up, especially as you get west of Minnesota Beach, up toward New Bern itself. These are the areas where we're most concerned with coastal flooding and storm surge. The entire coastline is under storm surge watch. That is something new in terms of since the last briefing. That's mostly for 1 to 3 feet above normally dry ground. But the yellow shaded area there, that's where we could get 2, 3, 4, or even higher feet of surge and coastal flooding in the Neuse River. So that's the area we're especially concerned with, and that's why that area is under a storm surge warning, while the rest of the coastline is under a watch. As we animate this into the day Friday, still northeast winds initially. So again, still some concerns on the Outer Banks. The thing that's helping us is the period is not as long as it was last week with the last tropical system that was well out to sea. But the issue is any of the areas that have had vulnerabilities with dunes being eroded, we will see some coastal erosion because of the persistence on the northeast wind. And again, not as drastic, but even the western end of the Albemarle Sound, up the Pamlico, Pongo rivers, you're going to have some elevated water levels as well. But we're especially concerned with the Neuse. Now, as we head through the day tomorrow, winds shift from the northeast to the southeast, and that's where our concern turns toward the Crystal Coast a little bit more as Ian approaches. As I animate this through, you'll see some of the higher values indicated by the yellow shading, coastal Onslow County and Carteret. So we're talking places like North Topsail Beach, maybe Bogue Inlet, also up the southern part of the White Oak River, and then also with that northeast wind, Beaufort, we're certainly seeing some elevated tide levels there as well. So a very complicated forecast. Bottom line, persistent northeast winds will pile up the water, especially on the southern Pamlico. We're talking down east Carteret and the Neuse River. That's where we think the highest levels will be. Some ocean impacts, especially north of Cape Hatteras with the northeast flow. Then as the storm approaches and we get into a southeast wind, the concern will turn more toward North Topsail, Bogue Inlet, some of those oceanfront areas along the Crystal Coast. For the oceanfront areas, encourage you to look at the water level gauges that you're probably super familiar with. But since I have you, we can already see, elevated water levels in downtown Beaufort at the high tide now. The next high tide of concern for Beaufort would be noontime tomorrow. So again, with that northeast wind really piling up the water, we could have some water issues in some of the prone areas in downtown Beaufort. So certainly watch out for that. As far as the Outer Banks are concerned, I'll show you not a huge concern on Soundside Outer Banks. I know Hatteras Islands is always concerned with that when we have a tropical system, but maybe getting to action stage here as we get into Friday night into Saturday, but does not look like a Soundside issue on the Outer Banks. It looks like more a down east Carteret through the Neuse River. And then up in Duck, this will show you that we're at high tide cycle now, but the next one of concern could get up there in the minor to maybe moderate stage, and that would be late tomorrow morning with those concerns. So I think that might be it in terms of what I was going to show you. I'll turn it over to you all for any questions. I see we have some in the chat now, and I'm going to pull up our latest graphics. We will send out a PDF hopefully within the hour or so about the headline changes. But again, the big change is tropical storm warning for our area. For most of us, it's going to be in gusts, especially inland, but coastal areas sustained and gusts. And we really have to watch this track. If it continues to shift east a little bit, some of our inland areas may see some stronger winds, places like Lenoir, Duplin, and Onslow County as well. So I think that's it on our end. I'm going to turn the screen sharing off, and I'll be happy to take any questions. So I've got a couple questions in here from Jonathan. I see Richard has a question as well. So you can certainly ask the questions through the GoToWebinar feature. If you want to raise your hand, we've got about 110 people on the call. So if you want to raise your hand and ask a verbal question, just do that, and I will unmute your mic. Otherwise, once you're free to go, but once we get this, I can get working on the briefing and hope to have it out within the next half an hour so that you can send it to your people in the community that are making the decision. So Jonathan asked, major concern for straight line winds. Not a huge concern. Jonathan, you're asking about Edgecombe County, that's out of our area, but not a big concern for straight line winds. Most of us 30 to 40 mile per hour range. Right now, the strongest winds are definitely along the coast itself. But I will preface it with as you saw in that model depiction, as the heavier rain rotates onshore tomorrow, we could have some isolated tornadoes. So that could cause some enhanced areas of damage well away from the center. We always preach this in preparedness, that impacts occur well away from the center, and this is certainly a good example of that. Richard, yeah, so Richard, thank you for that. So Richard's from Carteret Community College, saying they're running about a foot above normal at high tide. So any of those reports will help us with that persistent northeast wind continuing through tonight. The lower, the Neuse River, the lower Pamlico Sound, down East Carteret, Beaufort, that water is only going to continue to get higher. And the biggest concern for tidal areas would be that high tide late tomorrow morning. So that's going to be pretty persistent here for the next about 24 hours. Then as the winds shift around to the southeast, we may see some water piling up, Bogue Inlet, southern part of the White Oak River, and then places like Topsail Beach and maybe even New River, places like that. All right. So this is a good question from Virginia, asking about the Seafood Festival. We're optimistic. Friday doesn't look good. Tomorrow, periods of rain, windy, isolated tornadoes. Tomorrow is not looking good at all. But we're optimistic. I'll go back to that image showing the Saturday, midnight. Once this band of rain lifts north, we could be dry for a period on Saturday and even Sunday. Where the question marks are, Virginia, I'll kind of animate this into the day since you were asking about that. It goes to 8 o'clock on Saturday. So we're optimistic, especially for Saturday. Winds won't be quite as strong, and certainly not the heavy rain that we're going to see Friday. These are the remnants. I forgot I wasn't showing the screen, Virginia. I'll pop that back up for you. These are the remnants of Ian over northwest North Carolina, southwest Virginia. We could see some scattered showers rotate back over us this weekend, so it's not a completely dry forecast. But as it stands right now, less wind, certainly less rain Saturday and Sunday. So we're crossing our fingers that it looks more optimistic over the weekend for you folks in Moorhead. So I don't see any more written questions. Raise your hand. There's a feature you can do, and you can ask a verbal one. I'll just unmute you. Otherwise, as soon as we're done here, I'm going to run out there and crank out this briefing so you have something to forward on. But impacts haven't changed drastically, just refining. We're more confident, and the headline changes are the biggest ones. The storm surge watch along our coast, storm surge warning for the Neuse River, and tropical storm warning for the whole area. So not seeing anything. I don't see anybody's hand raised. So we're going to cut it off so we can crank out that briefing. So thanks for joining us. We'll try to get this recording up on YouTube as soon as we can as well. And look for that briefing within an hour. The next one by 6 o'clock, another one tomorrow morning, and a webinar this time tomorrow. So hope all is well, and we will talk to you tomorrow. Take care.